In the very beginning, I would like to offer my greetings to all of you. Now, let us begin with, let us continue our discussion on the development of international legal framework, or you can say international legal framework for the protection of human rights. We have been discussing this subject for a few days, and before I proceed further, let me tell you first let me first summarize what I have already stated about this development. As I earlier stated, that in this discussion, means our discussion on this topic, this very topic, is limited to the development of international law on human rights. We are not discussing here the history of human rights. The history of human rights is different from the history of international international legal framework for the protection of human rights. Because history of human rights, as I already told you in my previous talks and lectures, as I already told you, that human rights are basically they are the moral rights. So for their establishment or for asserting this thing that they exist, we need not we need not discuss any legal framework, because we take it as morally established, and we are morally bound to you can say bound to the obligations that arises under the human rights the human rights norms, internationally accepted norms of human rights. So, but that is why I am emphasizing this thing, that let it be very clear that discussion history of human rights is a different thing, and this time we are not discussing the history of human rights, but we are discussing the evolution of international legal framework for the protection of human rights. And for that purpose, as I told you in my previous lecture, that it is for that purpose we start with the establishment of the United Nations, because it is the establishment of the United Nations in 1945. It is from that period, that means when the United Nations was established, the international legal framework began to evolve. So, and not only it began to evolve, you can also say that it began to evolve in a comprehensive and systematic manner, because I already told you one thing, that the objectives of the United Nations, there are two objectives of the United Nations. One is the international peace and security, maintenance of international peace and security, and the second, encouraging and promoting respect for human rights for all without any distinction. So these are the two basic objectives, and under the scheme of the United Nations Charter, they are interrelated. These two themes are interrelated. They are presented as interrelated themes. So, and this idea that the question of international peace and security and the question of realization of human rights by people, they are interrelated. This idea is not the innovation of the United Nations, and for that purpose, I also I took reference to the establishment of the League of Nations, and in fact, you can say in a sense I started from 1919 when League of Nations was established, and when International Labour Organization was established. Both were established simultaneously at the same time and as part of the Brussels Convention. Brussels TT, TT of Brussels, and in that League of Nations, that time that was adopted, and the covenant of League of Nations, that is the, you can say, the constitution of the League of Nations, although that that does not refer to the phrase human rights, but if you look at the covenant, certain provisions of the covenant, then it becomes apparent that it is concerned with the very idea of the respect, very idea of the promoting respect for human rights. Because it is established, as I already told you, is established a system of mandate, and it cast upon those who were administering those mandates this basic duty that you have to ensure that their rights are not violated. Under mandate system, those states were placed which were not free by that time, and certain states were the defeated states in the First World War, so they were placed under the system of mandate. So authority which was administering mandate, that was under certain obligations, but there was no you can say the term human rights was not used, and nor it was declared that it is one of the objective of the League of Nations is to ensure human rights to all human beings. Last time means in my previous lectures, in my first lecture of this series, I told you in detail that at the same time International Labour Organization was established, and it is the labor of constitution of the International Labour Organization that makes it very clear that no everlasting peace is possible unless we address the issues related to people's rights, unless we are prepared, unless we address the issues related to the rights of the people. So rights of those groups of people who are still denied certain basic rights or certain freedoms. For example, freedom from fear and freedom from want. And in this direction, there was also a very important means you can say development occurred when Philadelphia Declaration was adopted. Then when the Constitution of International Labour Organization was amended by the Philadelphia Declaration of 1944, that made it very clear that that it used certain means it was based on the certain principles, and one of those principles was that the labor is not a commodity. So please don't look at the labor which a laborer implies in producing some good. So don't confuse his labor with a commodity. Second one of the most important principle that was incorporated in the Philadelphia Declaration, that says that poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. So the message is very clear that unless you address the issues of poverty, unless you issue the issues of means inequality, economic and social inequality, unless you address the issue of freedoms of expression, freedom from fear and want, you cannot imagine a society of countries or a society of nations which is means which is peaceful and there is a lasting peace. You cannot have the lasting peace unless you address all these things. So ILO Constitution of the International Labour Organization, that was means drawn in 1919. Even at that time, the preamble of the Constitution of the ILO very clearly says that no lasting peace is possible unless we give social justice, unless we do social justice. So the concept of social justice is not new, and it dates back to 1919. The International Labour Organization was established although in 1919, but later when United Nations was established in 1945, then it became a specialized agency of the United Nations, and perhaps it was the first specialized agency of the United Nations. Now, I means in a sense we started from the League of Nations, but the most important development was the establishment of the United Nations. And why I refer to the ILO Constitution and Philadelphia Declaration and the League of Nations, the idea, my objective is to emphasize this thing, that when United Nations Charter was under preparation and the world leaders they were involved in the drafting of the United Nations Charter, they were inspired by this very idea of the Constitution of International Labour Organization, that international peace and security and protection of human rights, they should go hand in hand. Because unless we address the issue of basic rights of the people, basic human rights, economic and social inequalities in the society, issue of poverty, international peace cannot be maintained forever. So for that reason, it is on this basic premise, you can say that this idea that they drafted the provisions of the United Nations Charter, and which is reflected in the very preamble of the United Nations Charter, which I referred to you last time, and this time I am not going to repeat it. And then I also last time told you that many provisions of the United Nations Charter, that how provisions of the United Nations are structured. They are very nicely and tidily structured, and separate organizations, separate organs were created for the international peace and security, and for the purpose of the promotion and encouragement of human rights for all without any distinction as to race, sex, language or religion. So how this human rights responsibility in relation to the promotion of human rights was given to the Economic and Social Council, although under the supervision of the General Assembly, and how the international and how they and I also told you that there was a provision in the charter in Article 68. According to that, the Economic and Social Council shall establish commission for that purpose, for the purpose of promotion of human rights. So when United Nations was established in 1945 and it came into force on 24th October 1945, soon after that, the Economic and Social Council very quickly they established a commission. And about that commission I was telling you last time, I also discussed that commission. That commission on human rights was established, and the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, they immediately started the task of standard setting. If you look at the work of the Commission on the Human Rights, which lasted up to the 2006, because in 2006 it was replaced by Human Rights Council. So now it is the responsibility of the Human Rights Council to prepare the draft for human rights and to work for the promotion of human rights. But earlier it was the task of the commission. So commission, it focused its attention first on the development of the standards of human rights. Second, after that, it took the work of implementation, and finally it focused on the promotional activities, that is, you can say, the providing technical help to countries in this regard, so that they can establish human rights system under their domestic law. So and creating awareness also about international human rights. So, and last time I was also telling you that this commission, the one very important achievement or accomplishment of this commission was that it prepared the draft of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and which was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly as a resolution on 10 December 1948. And it is for that reason that every year on 10 December we celebrate the Human Rights Day. So it drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It also undertook the task of drafting two covenants, international covenants. Means first it drafted the declaration, draft of the declaration. Then it began to draft conventions or treaties. Covenant is a name of treaty or convention. All these means these words are used interchangeably, and there is no important difference between these words. Convention, sometimes covenant, sometimes treaties, sometimes you can say act, sometimes charter, sometimes charters is also used. So charter means also the constitution. So you can say that they have then they started the task of preparing the draft of International Convention on Human Rights. Why? Because they developed the draft of, they drew the draft of the declaration, keeping in the mind that it is not legally binding. So, and it is only a collection of the moral principles. So it was thought that now we should prepare a draft of the convention which is legally binding on the state, and for that purpose they started the task of preparing a convention which is legally binding on the states. So they prepared the draft of two conventions. One is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and another was the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Under Universal Declaration of Human Rights, what happened, that both kinds of rights were given in the same instrument, means UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It combines all the rights in a single, you can say, document, single instrument. So it has listed all the rights, civil and political rights, as well as the economic, social and cultural rights. But later it was thought that when we are going to frame a draft which is intended to be legally binding, and so we will need to redefine the human rights listed in the UDHR in the light of the new development, and also we have to provide for the enforcement mechanism. And so for that reason it is better to have two separate covenant. One is exclusively dealing with the civil and political rights, and the other is exclusively dealing with the economic, social and cultural rights, although both will be based on the same guiding principles, such as in both the cases means right to equality cannot be violated, means in both cases states cannot in both the cases people have the right of non-discrimination. So you can say that they prepared this is the reason. And one more reason why the commission prepared two separate drafts, one for economic and social rights council, and other one for economic and social rights and another for civil and political rights. The main reason was that because at that time the thinking was that civil and political rights, which we also call fundamental rights, civil and political rights are legally enforceable, but economic, social and cultural rights are not legally enforceable. So since in the case of covenant on the covenant on the economic and social rights, they were not they thought that they could not provide for an enforcement mechanism, whereas under ICCPR we must have to create a body which is ensuring the compliance of civil and political rights, because civil and political rights are they are means they can be enforced, they are enforceable rights, legally enforceable rights. So for that purpose we had to create a committee or some organization which monitors the compliance of human rights, and for that purpose we have to give the right to the people, so that they, in the case when it is violated, they can approach the appropriate forum. So it was this thing that they prepared the thing. It was this idea that that prompted the you can say drawing up the two separate drafts, one on civil and political rights and another on economic, social and cultural rights. But last time what I told you in detail that how many conventions were adopted by the United Nations under the auspices of the United Nations after opposed this Universal Declaration of Human Rights and ICCPR and ICSCR. There are other human rights conventions they were adopted, and even most of them were adopted by the Commission, because Commission was working until 2006 when it was replaced by the Human Rights Council. So by that time it made the draft of many international conventions on human rights. And in my previous lecture I was telling you that what are those conventions which are termed as the core conventions, core human rights conventions. And I mentioned the names of 9 conventions which are you can say that they are known as the core human rights convention. Why they are treated as a core human rights convention? Uh, there is no, you can say, objective criteria or criterion on the basis of which we can distinguish between different international human rights conventions into two groups, that 9 are core and rest are not the core conventions as far as their significance is concerned. Those conventions which are not included in this core conventions, they are equally very important. They are also very important conventions. For example, that on 9 December 1948, the international community, the General Assembly, adopted a very important convention, that was the Convention Against the Crime of Genocide. So that was in 1948, but it is not included under the core convention of these human rights core conventions. Core conventions. What is the reason? Reason may be that simply that you can say that sometimes you have to draw a line, and so in order to draw a line, we means that we were prepared to call certain human rights conventions as a core human rights conventions, because the feature, one of the most salient features of the you can say core human rights conventions is that they not only define the rights, but they also establish a body under the convention, under respective convention, which is given the task of monitoring the compliance of those rights. So this is very important, and this thing is not means this type of implementation mechanism is not provided in the other conventions. So that may also be the one reason that why we didn't include them under the category of core conventions. So last time I was telling you the 9 core conventions, starting from ICCPR, ICSCR, then I told you about the International Convention against the racial discrimination, Convention against racial discrimination. So that time racial discrimination was a very significant issue, because even after the adoption, even after the establishment of the United Nations, and even after the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations, even after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, means apartheid was in practice in many countries. So we adopted a convention which is solely on the topic of which was solely on the topic of, you can say, racial discrimination. Then we adopted one more very important convention, that is known as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination Against Women, and that is, the abbreviation is CEDAW. And under that also we established a committee that is known as the CEDAW. And then we adopted the Convention Against Torture in 1984. CEDAW was adopted in 1979. Racial Discrimination Convention was adopted in 1965. And then you can say after that we adopted the very famous convention, that is the Convention on the Rights of Child in 1989, which was later amended by a protocol. So and after that there are 3 more conventions which are important. One is the Convention on the Rights of the Migrant Workers, and this was adopted in 2000, in the year of 2000. And then there is a convention very important, that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that is, the abbreviation is CRPD. Convention on the Rights of Person with Disabilities. So that was also very important convention. It was adopted in 2006, and finally we adopted a convention that is known as the Convention for the Protection of the Rights of Person against Enforced Disappearance, and for that purpose a committee was also established. In fact, there are 10 TT bodies, 9 core conventions, and under these 9 core conventions 10 TT bodies have been established. Now you can say, now you will ask that in which convention 2 bodies were established. Then then I can tell you the under torture convention against torture and cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment. Under that convention, not only they have the committee against torture, but they have also established a subcommittee for investigating the cases of the torture and cruelty, that is known as the Sub-Commission on the Rights Against Torture. So you can say that there are 10 TT bodies. So what is TT? What are the TT bodies? TT body is an international mechanism. TT body, I am talking about the TT body. TT body means the bodies which are established under the respective human rights core human rights convention, that they are to ensure the compliance of the human rights. So because it is for that purpose convention was adopted, because convention is binding, and when the convention is binding on the state signatory, it means the states which have ratified it. So it means they should also be they also agreed to this thing, that yes, there is no problem in having an enforcement mechanism. If I am violating any human rights obligations, then that body can ask explanation from me, and there is no problem. So I will submit I will fulfill all those requirements relating to the compliance mechanism. So this is the difference between convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because Universal Declaration of Human Rights was only a set of declarations. It was only a list of human rights, and it didn't provide any enforcement mechanism. What is important here is that now here we can discuss two things. First, I can go to tell you about some more conventions, international conventions, apart from these core human rights conventions, 9 core human rights conventions, that there are several other conventions. So let me first tell you those conventions, an idea of those conventions, then we will return to that Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What is the significance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? But first, let me tell you some more conventions on human rights. So you now know that 9 core conventions, and as far as some more conventions are concerned, one very important, let me tell you, there are 4 very important conventions which are known as the Geneva Conventions. They were adopted in 1949 under the auspices of the International Committee on Red Cross. Red Cross, you know, the Red Cross is an organization and which is overseeing the implementation of the 4 Geneva Conventions. These 4 Geneva Conventions, they are related to the international humanitarian law, means they are related to the conduct of war. Means even in the case of war, when 2 states are in war, even then, even that time, international law is applying. So what are those rules? They are given in 4 Geneva Conventions. The first Geneva Convention is about the protection of those military personnel who are wounded or who sick during war on the land, and second is the for those who are sick and wounded, and on the sea during war. And the third convention is about the protection of the prisoners' rights, and the fourth convention is about the protection of the civilian population during war, because it is a principle of basic principle of international law of war, which is now called international humanitarian law. International humanitarian law is the new terminology. Earlier this body was known as the laws of war. So this, according to this convention, that even during war, civilian population should not be targeted. So they provide a list of those things which cannot be targeted, means civilian population which is not part of the combatants. And there is a definition of combatants who should be taken as part of the combatants. So you can attack only on the combatants, you cannot attack on the civilian population. So and after that it was further developed, and two additional protocols were added in 1977. One was related to the internal armed conflict and international armed conflict. They provided further protection. And one important thing that I should also tell you, that these Geneva Conventions, they not only applies to international war or the war between two states, they also apply to internal civil wars, internal armed conflict. So what is civil war, what is international armed conflict, and when it is recognized as the means situation of belligerency or situation of insurgency, all that we study under international law, and I am not going to discuss all those aspects here. So this is all about Geneva Conventions and two additional protocols. Although there is one more protocol, I am not referring to that for the reason that is not very important. That was adopted in 2005, but the third protocol, but that relates to the, you can say, the emblem of the Red Cross. So now here I can also tell you that there are a number of conventions we adopted in the field of slavery. So in 1926 we established, that time it was League of Nations that was established, and in 1926 we adopted a convention against slavery that is very known as the Paris Convention. This was the first convention dealing with the practice of slavery. So it condemned slavery, and it put obligation on the country to sign this declaration that they should gradually abolish this practice, and they gradually abandon this practice of slavery. But since it was not, no immediate obligation was cast on the member states, so in 1956 a supplementary convention was adopted on the same subject, under which it was clearly provided that states are now under legal obligation that they immediately prohibit slavery from their territories, and for that purpose they can enact criminal laws, any penal law for that purpose, because now it is your immediate responsibility. So it is with idea that it was adopted, and the supplementary convention has also defined slavery in some more broad terms than the previously adopted 1926 Convention on Slavery. So it listed many other similar practices which are slavery. So slavery means that when it is a kind of situation, slavery or servitude, it is a kind of situation where one person exercises the rights of ownership over the body of another person. So it is not simply sufficient to say that one is exercising rights of ownership over another person, but since slavery uh, exists in many forms. Sometimes it exists in the form of the bonded labor. You can say bonded labor. You can say forced labor, compulsory labor. So these are called the modern form of slavery. Although slavery in its classical sense doesn't exist today, but still means it is existing in the forms of the forced labor, compulsory labor, bonded labors. And in bonded labors, what happens that that person has to work on the field of its owner, and and he is bound to do the work, and whatever means his can say remuneration, as far as the remuneration is concerned, this remuneration is you can say that that remuneration is now that is you can say that is adjusted against the low interest on the loan that he took from the landlord. So in that way, what happens that original loan is never satisfied. So he are always under the debt. Since he is always under the debt, so he will become never free. And what happens that after his death, his children, they again become the bonded laborers. So this cycle continues. So there is the need to break it. So for that purpose, so in this field, child labors, what happened when, now when we are talking about the child labors, then I can tell you that International Labour Organization had adopted a number of international conventions and even recommendations related to the rights of laborers, and that includes the rights related to the minimum hours of work, that influence even the domestic law of labor, domestic law on the labor law, domestic law on rights of the laborers. Means maximum power, maximum hours of work was prescribed, and it was provided under the convention that they should also be given the weekly holiday. They should also be given the rest time for rest and leisure, and they should also be given social security in the case of sickness, in the case of unemployment, in the case of disability related to employment, all those things. And there is also a convention on the equal remuneration. Means sometimes in certain industrial organizations, what happens that they make means they discriminate between men and women in as far as the remuneration is concerned. So equal pay for equal work is related to that convention was also adopted. So, and even in the case of forced labor, they adopted a convention in way back in 1930, and then it was revised later, and recently in 2014 they came out with a new protocol on the modern form of slavery. So that is very interesting development, but this time I can't discuss that because this time my scope of discussion it is not covered under the scope of discussion, but later on we will discuss this in detail. In the class of I have discussed this protocol several times in my classroom, but since here I want to be precise, so I do not want to discuss that. We will discuss that thing later. So there are number of other. My point is that there are number of other international instruments which are not included under the you can say core human rights conventions, but they are also very significant and important contributions in the field of international legal protection of human rights. And here I also should take note of those certain more conventions, such as the statute of the International Criminal Court. International Criminal Court was established in 2000 and its statute was prepared in 1998. And that statute, which is known as the Rome Statute, it lists three kinds of or four kinds of you can say international crimes. One is the crime of aggression, second is the crime against humanity, third is the war crime, and the fourth is the genocide. So they are the international crimes, though they are also important from the human rights point of view, because international crime, if someone is committing international crime, then he is violating human rights of the people. So those who are responsible for conducting, for doing this, who are involved in, or who are the perpetrators of international crimes, they must be punished, and for that purpose, International Criminal Court was established. This is a permanent court, and it is established in Hague, where you can say International Court of Justice is also situated, and where Permanent Court of Arbitration is also situated. And when where at that is a place where earlier means the predecessor of International Court of Justice, that was a Permanent Court of Justice, that was also means situated there. So now you can say in the Hague. So Hague is a very important place from the point of view of the international law. Neither Hague, that is in Netherlands. So now you see that there and not only International Criminal Court, but we also established certain ad hoc military tribunals for the trial of genocide, crime of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and you can say. So these kinds of rights, so they also adopted, they also have their statute, and their statute, they those statutes, they are what? They are international conventions. So they can also be referred to in this regard. So they are also human rights instruments. So means there are a number of international human rights instruments, and there is no point in mentioning all those human rights instruments here, because if you are interested in knowing more about that, then I am giving a simple tip which I already perhaps told you, that you go to the website of the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights. The abbreviation is OHCHR. So you simply browse OHCHR in Google, then you will find the website of the official website of the OHCHR, and on that official website, the information about all international human rights instruments and even non-binding instruments are also given there, such as non-binding instruments. As far as non-binding are concerned, you can say that UDHR, which I referred to you initially, that UDHR is a non-binding declaration. Nowadays it is binding, because it now has become part of customary international law, and now it is widely regarded that this declaration has become binding, legally binding. But otherwise it is a declaration which is considered as non-binding. Then there is a Vienna Declaration, very important human rights declaration, like UDHR is the Vienna Declaration on Human Rights, that was adopted in 1993 when Vienna Conference on Human Rights happened. Then after that we adopted Millennium Development Goals, that is also a declaration of the United Nations. So now you can say there are a number of non-binding instruments are also. There are a number of important resolutions of the General Assembly related to the rights of the colonial people, right of the self-determination, and rights of the people which are non-self governing people, non-self-governing. So there are means number of such human rights conventions and declarations, including binding, non-binding. But even non-binding declaration has their impact on the development of law, because although they are not binding, but they reflect the consensus of the states. For example, Vienna Convention. So it reflects the consensus of the state. Next time I will discuss this Vienna Declaration, some points about the Vienna Declaration, and then I will tell you that this Vienna Declaration, how this Vienna Declaration means resolve certain issues related to the human rights, that whether human rights are universal or not. So the declaration in very first article says that all human rights are universal. All human rights are universal, they are indivisible, they are interrelated and interdependent. So much controversy was resolved on the basis of this declaration. Although it is also true, and this is not the time to discuss that thing in detail, I can only just mention this thing that when Vienna Declaration was taking place in 1993, when it was decided that it would take place, then before that, ahead of that, the Asian countries, Asian countries, most of the Asian countries, you can say, they adopted their own declaration of human rights, that is known as the Bangkok Declaration of Human Rights, 1993. And in that declaration, they opposed the idea of universality of human rights, and they pleaded in their declaration, they said in their declaration, stated that human rights, there cannot be universally recognized standard of human rights, and human rights must be defined in the specific context of a culture, of a tradition. So Asians have a different traditions, they have different means values, their value system is different from the Western society, and in the way human rights are defined in international instruments, including UDHR, they are influenced by the Western idea, and in fact it is the Western idea that is of human rights that is imposed on the other states. United Nations was also mainly it was created by the European states. So they, from the very beginning, they were European states were controlling the international law principles, and they by that way they impose their idea of human rights upon us, when we have our own idea of human rights. And one philosopher who is greatly who has very vigorously, and he is who has supported this idea that Asian countries have distinct tradition and distinct value, and for that purpose they they have their human rights standard. Whenever you are defining the human rights standard, you must take into account the Indian tradition, Indian values. So this point was supported by one great scholar, contemporary scholar, Professor Amartya Sen. So Amartya Sen had always believed in this idea that in ancient India also we have certain concept like human rights, which are equivalent to the idea of human rights, and our values were very different, and in any discussion on human rights must take place within the cultural space, a particular cultural space. So for that point of view, you can say that they supported this Bangkok Declaration. But what was stated in Bangkok Declaration, that was not approved in the Vienna Declaration. In Vienna Declaration, the states took just opposite position, that human rights are universal rights. So now on this topic, that human rights are universal rights, and and the adoption of the UDHR, when why UDHR means it is proclaimed that Universal Declaration of Human Rights declares all human rights as universal. So why human rights are universal, and what is the debate between those who assert that human rights are universal and those who say that no, human rights are not universal, they are specific to culture and they cannot be studied, means if you are indifferent to the culture, society, tradition where they are to apply. So there are differing views. So next time we will discuss this aspect, whether human rights are universal, but in a limited context. Limited context means that with reference to the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So for Universal Declaration of Human Rights is based on the idea that human rights are universal. So what was the controversy at that time when UDHR was established, and why the scholars of the world, they were divided that UDHR should undertake should undertake the development of the universal standards of human rights or not, and there were many organizations who were against this idea. Then how finally means what came to be settled, and what is the settled position, that will be a long discussion. That is why I am saying that we will discuss that from a limited perspective, means with reference to the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So with these words, now I am finishing my today's talk. Thank you very much.